he loved the song. Dolly Parton, America's sweetheart and country music's beloved icon, has spent decades charming the world with her voice and heart. But what if we told you that behind that dazzling smile lies a trail of tension, betrayal, and legendary feuds that never made the headlines? They smiled on camera, and they praised her in public. But behind the scenes, there were slammed doors, bitter words, and broken friendships. One singer said they'd never work with her again. Another tried to steal her biggest hit. And although she's tried to keep it a secret, we finally know the 5 singers Dolly couldn't stand working with. But what really happened behind closed doors? And why are some of those old wounds still wide open today? When you find out the truth, you'll never see Dolly Parton the same way again. Dolly Parton's journey to fame. You might know her for the big hair, the bedazzled outfits, and that voice that could make angels cry. But behind the scenes, Dolly Parton has a story that's more jaw-dropping than you think. Her journey from dirt-poor beginnings to music royalty is one for the books. And many people don't know that it's packed with a lot of drama. While she's known as the Queen of Kindness, there are a few names in the industry that she's had some intense friction with. But to understand who Dolly clashed with, you first have to understand her and why she's not one to get involved in drama. Dolly Rebecca Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in a tiny one-room cabin in Locust Ridge, Tennessee. She was raised in a loving but struggling family, with 12 kids crammed into a simple mountain home. Her father, Lee Parton, was a hard-working farmer and construction man who couldn't read or write. But Dolly says he was the smartest man she ever knew. Her mother, A.V. Lee, had 12 children before she turned 35, and she definitely passed on her deep love for storytelling, music, and God to Dolly. But music wasn't a hobby for Dolly. It was survival. The Partons didn't have money for entertainment, so the kids learned to sing in church and harmonize on the porch. Dolly's family noticed her voice early on, and by the time she was 10, she was performing on local radio and TV shows in nearby Knoxville. And it wasn't long before she began performing at the Grand Ole Opry. The day after she graduated high school in 1964, she packed a bag and took off for Nashville with no money or connections. Just raw talent and dreams bigger than the Smoky Mountains she left behind. And she started off by writing songs for others. But she didn't just want to be a songwriter. She wanted the spotlight, and she got it. Her first country hit came in 1967 with Dumb Blonde, a clever little song that basically told the world she wasn't just a pretty face, but a smart one. But how did she go from a Nashville newbie to a global icon? Well, it all began when she joined the Porter Wagoner Show in 1967, and everything changed. Millions saw her on TV every week. Her duets with Porter were instant hits. People loved their chemistry, their harmonies, and Dolly's magnetic personality. And by the early 70s, she launched her solo career, and no one could stop her. Jolene came in 1973 and became an anthem. Then came I Will Always Love You, which was a global hit. And in case you're wondering, yes, Whitney Houston's version came much later and turned it into one of the biggest songs of all time. But Dolly still owns the rights. She made millions from that one song, and she never brags about it. By the 1980s, Dolly was everywhere. In movies, music, merch, you name it. She starred in 9 to 5 alongside Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin and proved she wasn't just a singer, she could act too. Then came Dollywood, her very own theme park, which opened in 1986 in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. While other stars were buying yachts, Dolly built a family amusement park in her hometown to boost the local economy. But don't let the kindness fool you, because Dolly's one of the smartest businesswomen in showbiz. She's written over thousands of songs, earned multiple Grammys and Lifetime Achievement Awards, and has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is not bad for a girl who had no running water growing up. But that's not all. She's also given away millions of books through her Imagination Library, a project that makes sure kids have access to books, no matter where they live. Over the years, Dolly has built this image of being sweet, humble, and above the drama. But even a Southern angel has her limits, and over the decades, a few names have popped up again and again. People she clashed with, people who underestimated her, people who thought they could control her or take credit for her shine. And of course, Dolly remembers. She may smile through it, but behind the scenes there have been feuds, tension, and hurt feelings she's never forgotten. And one of the earliest, and perhaps most complicated, was with a man who helped launch her career, then tried to own it. And you won't believe how this professional partnership turned into one of the messiest splits in country music. Dolly Parton versus Porter Wagoner. Before Dolly was a global icon, Porter Wagoner was already a huge name in country music. He made a name for himself with a charm and a voice that could cut through any heart. He wasn't just a singer, he was a full-on showman, and by the 1960s, he had his own TV show called The Porter Wagoner Show, one of the biggest syndicated country music shows in America. His stage presence was flashy, but behind the scenes he was sharp, business-minded, and deeply traditional. He knew what sold, and he saw something special in Dolly Parton. When Dolly Parton joined Porter's show, replacing his previous female vocalist, Norma Jean, for fans who adored Norma, the swap wasn't welcome at first. People booed Dolly on stage. Some even wrote her angry letters, but Porter insisted on keeping her. And Dolly, she stayed gracious, calm, and determined because she had a point to prove. And it didn't take long for the two to become a hit duo. Their harmonies were electric, and their chemistry was pure gold. Together they scored over a dozen top 10 hits. Songs and on camera, they looked like the perfect team, but behind the smiles, tension was brewing. Here's the thing. Porter Wagoner didn't just want to sing with Dolly. He reportedly wanted to control her career. He managed her appearances, decided what songs they'd record, and had the final say on most business decisions. But Dolly wasn't just a singer with a pretty face. She was a songwriter, a thinker, and a woman with her own vision. She had ambition that stretched far beyond duet records and guest spots on TV. She played along for years, but the more famous she became, the more she wanted to stand on her own. Soon she was getting frustrated, and she began writing songs that didn't fit the Porter and Dolly mold. She wanted creative freedom, and more importantly, control over her own voice. She later confessed that Porter had a hard time thinking of her as his equal. In the beginning, he had given her a platform, but years later, that same platform had become a cage. Still, she didn't leave right away. She knew she owed him a lot. But by 1973, the tension was unbearable. And in 1974, she left the Porter Wagoner Show. To the public, it looked amicable. But behind closed doors, that was just the beginning. 5 years after she walked away, Porter came back swinging with lawyers. In 1979, he sued Dolly for $3 million, claiming that she'd broken their contract. He said she owed him for management fees, show expenses, and a cut of her income since leaving the show. Dolly was stunned. She had always seen Porter as a mentor, even if they didn't part on great terms. This lawsuit felt like betrayal, and for a while, it got ugly. There were public statements, press coverage, and industry whispers, but Dolly didn't drag him through the mud. Instead, she quietly settled the case out of court. She later spoke about how she didn't want to fight, but just wanted to be free instead. The whole situation took a toll on Dolly emotionally. Porter had meant something to her, and he had been there at the beginning. They'd made history together, and yet he couldn't let her go without a fight. She once said in an interview, "When I was trying to leave the show, I had told Porter I'd stay 5 years. It had been 5, and it was 6, and it was 7. He was just having a really hard time because it was going to mess up his show. We were very bound and tied together in so many emotional ways, and he just would not hear it. That statement said it all. Their feud wasn't just about money. It was much deeper than that, and this revealed an ugly part of Porter that Dolly had never seen before. And this reportedly hurt her so much. But the good part is that time, as always, changes things. By the late 1980s, after years of being on bad terms, Porter and Dolly had started talking again. In 2002, Dolly did something that surprised a lot of people. She inducted Porter Wagoner into the Country Music Hall of Fame. On stage, she told the audience how much he meant to her, even through their tough times. And when Porter was hospitalized in 2007 with lung cancer, Dolly reportedly visited him. Just weeks later, Porter passed away. Dolly was devastated. She held a tribute concert at Dollywood, not for the public, not for the headlines, but for the man who helped launch her dreams, even if he tried to hold them back. This experience with Porter is definitely one of the most complex chapters in Dolly's career, and one that shaped her in ways few people realize. But this next person on Dolly's list said something that shocked not just Dolly, but the entire world. Dolly Parton versus Linda Ronstadt. They were the dream team, three powerhouse women in country music: Dolly Parton, Linda Ronstadt, and Emmylou Harris, who came together to collaborate on the legendary album Trio. Their voices blended perfectly, producing hits that still give us chills. But behind the scenes, it wasn't all sunshine and sing-alongs, especially between Dolly and Linda. And what started as a musical sisterhood nearly unraveled into a full-blown feud. Back in the mid-1970s, Dolly, Linda, and Emmylou were already stars in their own right. They admired each other's work and dreamed of collaborating. But with conflicting schedules and record label politics, their plans kept getting delayed. It wasn't until 1987 that their first album, titled Trio, finally dropped. The album was a smash. It went platinum, topped the country charts, and even snagged a Grammy. But while the music was harmonious, the recording sessions were anything but that. Dolly, known for her quick work ethic, preferred to nail songs in 1 or 2 takes. Linda, on the other hand, was a perfectionist, often spending hours to get a single vocal just right. Emmylou was the mediator, trying to keep the peace. Dolly once revealed that working with Linda was like dealing with a diva who loves to live in the studio and work so slowly. She even spoke about wanting to yell at Linda countless times. It got so bad that it became clear to everyone that their working styles clashed, and tensions were simmering beneath the surface. Despite the challenges, the trio attempted a second album in 1994. They recorded Trio 2, but label disputes and scheduling conflicts delayed its release. Thankfully, the album eventually saw the light of day in 1999. But it was too late, as the damage to their relationship was done. While Dolly and Linda's relationship may have started with mutual admiration and some friendly competition, it certainly didn't end on the best of terms. In fact, Linda was quite vocal about her frustrations with Dolly's unreliability when it came to the project. Linda once slammed Dolly in an interview, stating that she was hard to rely on during the recording sessions. She claimed that Dolly would often cancel plans or show up late, and this frustrated her a lot. In fact, she once said that Dolly was never on time and that she was always a little flaky. But it wasn't just about being tardy. Linda made it clear that she felt Dolly didn't fully respect the process or commitment needed to complete the project. Linda felt like Dolly was more concerned with her solo career than the group effort, and it left a bitter taste between them. That tension between the two was enough to cause some serious friction. In fact, Linda made it known that she had no intention of working with Dolly again. Linda confessed that she felt that Dolly's lack of professionalism had spoiled what was supposed to be a joyful collaboration. Of course, time heals some wounds, because years later, despite all the bad blood, Linda and Dolly would show signs of reconciling. But it wasn't without its moments of awkwardness. It's clear that both women probably still held a grudge, and while they aren't openly hostile towards each other, they don't exactly make an effort to rekindle their friendship. So while the trio legacy lived on and fans celebrated their historic collaboration, Linda's words still echoed in Dolly's ears, leaving a bad taste in her mouth. Elvis Presley. When you think of Elvis Presley, you think of the king of rock and roll, a cultural icon who changed the face of music forever. And then there's Dolly Parton, the country queen whose songwriting skills have made her a legend. But despite their legendary status in the music world, there was one moment in history when the two musical giants almost crossed paths. But they didn't, due to a serious tension involving one iconic song. It all began with Dolly's iconic ballad, I Will Always Love You. This song, which Dolly wrote in 1973, was deeply personal for her. It was about her decision to leave her longtime mentor, Porter Wagoner, and pursue a solo career. While it started as a heartfelt farewell, it became one of the most well-loved country songs of all time. And Dolly poured everything into the lyrics. The song was released as a single and quickly became a hit, earning her widespread recognition. But what she didn't know at the time was that Elvis Presley's team had their eyes on the song too. The king himself wanted to cover it, and his team was already making moves to make it happen. In the mid-1970s, Elvis was on top of the world. He had a reputation for taking other artists' songs and making them his own. So, when he expressed interest in I Will Always Love You, Dolly was understandably flattered. However, there was a serious problem. You see, Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had a reputation for demanding outrageous deals when it came to songs for Elvis to record. And Dolly, who was just starting to make a name for herself as a songwriter, was not willing to bend. Colonel Parker wanted to take at least 50% of the royalties for any song Elvis recorded. And this was something Dolly couldn't accept. It wasn't just about the money, it was about respect for her craft. Dolly knew the value of her work, and she wasn't about to let someone take advantage of it. And so she turned Presley down. She told his manager, "This is the most important copyright in my whole publishing company, and I can't do that." Dolly has often shared that she felt very hurt about the deal. The story is a story of scandalous romances, forbidden affairs, and Hollywood's obsession with her love life. So why now? Why, after all these years, has Diane Lane decided to tell her side of the story? The answer may surprise you. Diane has seen it all: fame, love, heartbreak, and betrayal. But for the first time, she's ready to reveal the truth about the affairs that shocked Hollywood. She's setting the record straight on the romances that made headlines, the relationships she kept hidden, and the deep personal struggles she faced behind closed doors. The untold story of Diane Lane's childhood. Diane Lane has always carried herself with a quiet elegance. Her beauty, talent, and charm have made her one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses. But behind the glowing lights and red carpets, Diane's early years were anything but glamorous. Her story is not just about fame, it's about survival, resilience, and the search for love and stability in a world that felt anything but secure. Diane Colleen Lane was born on January 22, 1965 in New York City. Her mother, Colleen Farrington, was a stunning nightclub singer and Playboy centerfold model. Her father, Burton Lane, was a respected drama coach and cab driver. With parents like these, it seemed Diane was destined for a life in the entertainment world. From the outside, it looked like a glamorous start, having a mother who was a famous model and a father involved in the arts. But behind closed doors, things were far from perfect. Her parents had a passionate but troubled relationship. Love, arguments, and ambition clashed constantly. By the time Diane was just a baby, their marriage had fallen apart, and this divorce would change the course of Diane's entire childhood. Parents divorce, moving between homes, and feeling lost. After the divorce, Diane's custody became a battle. Her father, Burton, won custody of her, which was unusual at the time. But despite being in his care, life wasn't stable. Burton was passionate about the arts, but he struggled to make ends meet. Diane grew up in a tiny apartment in New York City, living in a room above a theater where her father taught acting classes. It wasn't the kind of childhood where she played in a backyard or had a cozy family home. Instead, she was surrounded by actors, scripts, and the unpredictable nature of her father's career. Despite the instability, Diane adored her father. He was her rock, the person who introduced her to the world of acting. But there was always a part of her that longed for a more traditional family life. Her mother, on the other hand, had left for Georgia to pursue her own dreams. She would come in and out of Diane's life, and for a long time, Diane felt torn between the two worlds, her father's struggling but loving environment, and her mother's distant but glamorous life. The biggest shock came when Diane was just 13 years old. Her mother kidnapped her and took her to Georgia, away from her father. This wasn't a dramatic escape in the middle of the night. Her mother simply decided that it was time for Diane to live with her. Diane, confused and scared, found herself in an entirely different world. But she wasn't the type to sit back and let life control her. Instead of staying in Georgia, she made a bold decision. She ran away back to New York. At just 14 years old, Diane Lane was living alone in the city, completely independent. How her troubled childhood shaped her views on love and trust. Growing up without stability left a mark on Diane. She had learned from a young age that love wasn't always reliable. People could leave. Trust could be broken. Her parents, despite loving her, had their own dreams, struggles, and conflicts. As a result, Diane had to raise herself in many ways. She learned independence at an age when most kids were still playing with toys. This had a profound effect on how she saw relationships. She became fiercely independent. She never wanted to depend on anyone emotionally or financially. She had trouble trusting love. Watching her parents' marriage fall apart, then being taken from her father by her mother, made her question whether love was truly stable. She learned to adapt. Moving between different homes, different cities, and different lifestyles taught her how to adjust to anything, an ability that would later serve her well in Hollywood. But it also made her crave deep, true love. Diane didn't want to repeat her parents' mistakes. She wanted a love that was strong, lasting, and real. This desire, however, would lead her into some of Hollywood's most complicated and scandalous relationships. As Diane grew older and entered the entertainment industry, she carried these childhood wounds with her. She longed for security and connection, but she also had a deep fear of being abandoned or hurt. This emotional battle would later play out in her personal life, leading to the scandalous affairs and dramatic love stories that would make headlines. But before we dive into those shocking revelations, let's take a look at how Diane's career skyrocketed and how Hollywood's obsession with her personal life began. Diane Lane's rise to fame. Diane Lane's journey from a troubled childhood to Hollywood stardom is nothing short of incredible. She wasn't just another pretty face trying to make it in the industry. She was a force of nature, a young girl who had lived through heartbreak and hardship but never let it define her. By the time she was a teenager, Diane had already lived more life than most people twice her age. She had been kidnapped by her own mother, lived alone in New York City, and navigated a world that often treated her like a grown-up long before she was ready. But instead of letting those struggles break her, she used them as fuel. Hollywood took notice, and soon the world would fall in love with Diane Lane, the bright young actress Hollywood couldn't ignore. Diane's entry into acting wasn't a coincidence. It was fate. She grew up surrounded by theater thanks to her father, who was a drama coach in New York. From a young age, she was captivated by storytelling and the emotions that actors could bring to life. At just 6 years old, Diane started performing in theater productions. She had a natural gift, a presence that demanded attention, even as a child. By the time she was in her early teens, it was clear she wasn't just a kid playing pretend. She was an actress, and a damn good one. Her big break came at the age of 13, when she landed a role in A Little Romance, 1979, a romantic drama where she starred alongside Laurence Olivier. Imagine being just a teenager and working with one of the greatest actors of all time. But Diane wasn't intimidated. She shined. Critics were blown away. Who was this young girl with such grace, depth, and screen presence? They called her the next big thing, and Hollywood directors lined up to work with her. For a while, it seemed like Diane Lane was unstoppable, but Hollywood is never that simple. Breakthrough roles that skyrocketed her career. After the success of A Little Romance, Diane's career took off. She became one of the most sought-after young actresses in the industry, starring in several major films throughout the 1980s. Some of her biggest early roles included The Outsiders, 1983, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. This film became a pop culture phenomenon. Diane starred alongside young heartthrobs like Tom Cruise, Patrick Swayze, and Matt Dillon. She played Cherry Valance, the girl who was too good for the bad boys but too curious to stay away. Rumblefish, 1983. Another Coppola film, this one was darker and more artistic. Diane's performance was praised, proving she wasn't just a teen movie actress. She had serious depth. Streets of Fire, 1984. This action-packed rock musical showcased Diane as a badass female lead, further cementing her star status. By this point, Diane Lane was everywhere. She was young, talented, and beautiful. Hollywood's perfect leading lady. But then, something unexpected happened. A couple of box office flops put a dent in her rising career. Movies like The Cotton Club, 1984, and Lady Beware, 1987, didn't perform well, and suddenly Hollywood started turning its back on her. For a while, Diane struggled. She had gone from being the industry's golden girl to being seen as just another actress who had lost her momentum. But Diane Lane wasn't about to disappear. She took a step back, reassessed, and came back stronger than ever. By the 1990s and early 2000s, Diane Lane had reinvented herself. She was no longer just the fresh-faced teen from the 80s. She had become a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. Hollywood fell in love with her all over again. Her big comeback happened with the film A Walk on the Moon, 1999, where she played a housewife who has an affair during the summer of Woodstock. The film was emotional, sensual, and powerful, and Diane's performance was breathtaking. Then came the role that changed everything. Unfaithful, 2002. This was the movie that made Diane Lane a legend. In Unfaithful, she played a woman caught in an intense extramarital affair, torn between guilt and desire. Her performance was so raw, so emotional, and so real that she earned an Academy Award nomination. Critics called her performance one of the best of the decade. Fans couldn't get enough of her. And once again, Diane Lane was at the top of Hollywood. But with fame comes scrutiny. The industry and the media had one question. How does Diane Lane make these roles feel so real? Is there something in her personal life that she's not telling us? The rumors started swirling. Was Diane's on-screen passion a reflection of real-life affairs? Was she as innocent as she seemed? Or was there a darker side to her love life? Suddenly, the world wasn't just interested in Diane Lane, the actress. They wanted to know about Diane Lane, the woman, her relationships, her affairs, her personal secrets. Hollywood wanted it all, and soon the scandals began. Was Diane Lane's reputation as America's sweetheart really what it seemed? Or was there another side to her, one that the public was never supposed to see? Love, fame, and controversy. Diane Lane was not just one of Hollywood's most talented actresses. She was also one of its most desired women. With her classic beauty, effortless charm, and undeniable talent, she captivated audiences and fellow actors alike. From the moment she stepped into the limelight, Diane attracted attention not just for her performances, but also for her personal life. The media followed her everywhere, eager to uncover details about the men she dated, the heartbreak she endured, and the rumors that surrounded her. Some relationships were sweet and romantic, others were intense and passionate, and a few ended in heartbreak. Through it all, Diane learned that love in Hollywood was never simple. Diane's first brush with romance in the industry came at a young age. Growing up in the entertainment world meant she was constantly surrounded by good-looking, ambitious men who were just as hungry for success as she was. One of her first high-profile relationships was with Christopher Lambert, the French-American actor best known for his role in Highlander. They met in the 1980s and had an instant connection. However, their relationship was more of a whirlwind romance than a lasting love story. They drifted apart as their careers took them in different directions, but fate had other plans for them later. Diane also dated several Hollywood heartthrobs over the years, including actors who were at the peak of their fame. One of the most talked-about relationships was with Timothy Hutton, an Oscar-winning actor with a reputation for being both charming and unpredictable. Their romance was passionate but short-lived, as their busy schedules and the pressures of fame made it difficult to maintain. There were also rumors of flings and secret relationships with some of Hollywood's biggest stars. Because Diane was always seen as elegant and graceful, the idea that she could have been involved in scandalous affairs made the tabloids go wild. Whether the rumors were true or just exaggerated gossip, Diane became one of the most talked-about women in Hollywood. Her first major heartbreak and how it changed her. One of the most defining relationships of Diane's life was her marriage to Christopher Lambert. Even though they had dated briefly in the 1980s, it wasn't until a decade later that they reconnected. When they met again, it felt like destiny. They got married in 1988 and had a daughter together, Eleanor. For a while, it seemed like Diane had finally found the love she had been looking for. She had a family, a successful career, and a seemingly stable life. But Hollywood is not an easy place for marriages. The constant pressure, long filming schedules, and the demands of being in the public eye took a toll on their relationship. Despite their deep connection, Diane and Christopher struggled to keep their marriage together. In 1994, after 6 years of marriage, they divorced. The split was heartbreaking for Diane, not just because of the love she lost, but because of the impact it had on her daughter. She had always wanted to give Eleanor a stable family life, something she never had growing up. The divorce felt like a personal failure. This heartbreak changed Diane in many ways. She became more guarded, more private about her relationships. She still believed in love, but she was more careful about who she led into her heart. The price of fame. Did Hollywood control her relationships? Being a successful actress in Hollywood came with a price, and for Diane, that price was often paid in her personal life. The entertainment industry has always had a way of controlling the love lives of its stars. Publicists, studios, and even movie contracts often dictated who an actor or actress would date, marry, or even be seen with in public. Many stars were forced into relationships for publicity, or kept apart from people they truly loved, because it didn't fit the studio's image for them. Diane, being one of the most beloved actresses of her generation, was no exception. Her relationships were constantly under scrutiny. Every man she was seen with became a headline. Every breakup was turned into a scandal. The media wanted to shape a narrative around her love life, often portraying her as the innocent beauty caught in tragic romances. In some ways, this constant attention made it difficult for her to have a normal relationship. There were times when she felt like she couldn't trust the people around her. Was someone dating her because they genuinely cared about her, or because they wanted to be in the spotlight? At one point, Diane even took a step back from dating in the public eye. She focused on her career, her daughter, and her own happiness, rather than chasing love the way Hollywood expected her to. But love has a funny way of finding people when they least expect it. After years of focusing on herself and her daughter, Diane found love again in the early 2000s. This time, it was with actor Josh Brolin. Josh was known for being rugged, charismatic, and incredibly talented. Their romance was passionate, and after dating for a while, they got married in 2004. For a time, it seemed like Diane had finally found the love she had been searching for. However, their marriage was not without its troubles. Josh had a troubled past.